Okay, let's dive into this. Today's explainer takes us on a truly wild ride through some source material that sits right at this mind-bending intersection of cutting-edge acoustic engineering, ancient history, and honestly, something that challenges the very boundaries of conventional science. We're going to be looking at a documented narrative about a physical object that, according to the accounts anyway, completely defied the laws of physics as we know them. It's just a fascinating look at how what we can measure with our absolute most advanced computers might just be, well, scratching the surface of what the source claims is actually out there. So here is the big question. Can a physical brick record a human voice for 1,200 years? I mean, it sounds like pure science fiction, right? We know vinyl records, magnetic tapes, your digital hard drives, obviously they store audio. But a crude clay brick from the 8th century? If I told you a piece of literal dried mud could act as a highly sophisticated audio recording device for over a millennium, you would probably tell me to go check my facts. But that is exactly the central, seemingly impossible mystery presented in our source material today. We're going to completely shift gears here, moving from a mindset of strict, cold data into an ancient puzzle that left modern scientists totally baffled. To really wrap our heads around this, we need to meet our main guy, Professor Rafik. According to the text, Rafik is a university acoustic engineer, and he is incredibly analytical. We're talking about the kind of guy who can walk into a completely empty room and, just by listening to the echo of his own footsteps, instantly tell you the room's exact age, its dimensions, the structural makeup of the walls. It's practically a superpower. Crucially, though, the source describes him as deeply, deeply skeptical of anything supernatural. To Rafik, miracles, not magic. They're just frequency miscalculations we haven't figured out yet. But in 2024, that whole worldview gets put through the ringer. He gets summoned to an archaeological dig at an ancient 1,200-year-old Muslim settlement near Mosul, over in the ancient region of Nineveh. An expedition team had dug up some foundation bricks with these bizarre grooves on them, grooves that looked suspiciously like they were holding vibrational data. Now, Rafik tackles this with sheer clinical precision. He doesn't treat this thing like some sacred relic. To him, it's a hard drive. He zeroes in on a specific brick, which they label brick number 2. He sets up a hypersensitive laser vibrometer to read these tiny microscopic indentations. And the laser actually picks up a frequency. It's right in the exact range of a human voice, but it just sounds like scrambled gibberish. So Rafik feeds this raw acoustic data into his supercomputer, applies a time reversal algorithm, basically flipping the sound wave and playing it backward. And that is when the impossible happens. The computer spits out a crystal clear human voice reciting the opening prayer of the Quran, Alhamdulillah, the Surah Fatiha. According to the raw data, this silent, dusty brick was speaking. Rafik's hands are literally shaking at this point, and honestly, it is so easy to understand why when you consider the massive scientific contradictions staring him right in the face. And this brilliantly illustrates the problem. Physics dictates that sound waves trapped in a porous material like clay, specifically in the silicate lattice or calcium oxalate, have a strict maximum natural preservation limit of about 200 years. That's it. After 2 centuries, the acoustic energy just completely dissipates. Yet this Nineveh brick is definitively dated at 1,200 years old. There is absolutely no known natural preservation energy capable of holding a sound wave for that long. Mathematically, physically, it should not exist. So what does Rafik do? What any good scientist does, he looks closer. He scans the brick again and discovers this ultrafine secondary layer hidden inside it, barely 0.02 millimeters thick. And get this, it's not made of normal clay. It's actually a biocrystal formed from human sweat. The source details this incredibly fascinating biological mechanism. When the ancient builder picked up the wet clay, the urea and sodium from his own sweat acted as a catalyst. Under very specific humidity and temperature conditions, it formed a biological nanogroove. Think of it like a microscopic vinyl track where the actual acoustic vibrations of the builder's voice were physically trapped in the stone as he spoke. But right when Rafik thinks he has this whole thing solved with biology and chemistry, the entire experiment crashes. He tries to play the audio back again, but that clear recitation, it's completely gone. Now the brick is only outputting these muffled, broken syllables, just alif lam mim. Rafik is pulling his hair out, he's tweaking algorithms, he's recalibrating the laser, but absolutely nothing works. It's right at this moment of pure frustration that an old Muslim guide on the expedition, a man named Abdullah, steps in, and he drops a quote that challenges everything Rafik stands for. Abdullah says, "Sir, the brick isn't responding because you are measuring it with machines. The brick wants you to listen with your heart." Of course, Rafik, being the strict acoustic engineer he is, naturally dismisses this. To him, sound is physics, right? It has absolutely nothing to do with the heart. But Abdullah's words kind of plant a seed. The source material then takes this really atmospheric shift, bringing us to midnight. The lab is completely dead silent. The rest of the camp is asleep. Rafik is totally alone with the brick. He's turned all the glaring computer monitors off. He decides to just put the laser down for a second and physically place his own ear against the cold clay. At first, nothing, just silence. But as his bare hands gently cradle this ancient artifact in the dark, he notices something that defies his entire career. The brick begins to feel warm to the touch. It literally feels as though it is physically responding to his presence. In that quiet, really intimate moment, completely overwhelmed by the mystery of it all, Rafik's lips move almost spontaneously. He breathes a single whispered word into the silent room, Bismillah, which translates to, in the name of God. The text frames this moment not just as some religious utterance, but as an actual acoustic password. The exact second those specific sound waves leave his mouth, a pulse, a literal physical vibration emanates directly from the brick. Rafik immediately scrambles, powers the computer back up, and hits record. And what the computer captures this time is just breathtaking. The clear recitation of the Fatiha is back, but this time it's followed by a deep, emotional plea from that original builder, recorded 1,200 years ago. The voice says, "O God, let every brick of this mosque remember you until the day of judgment. If a servant with ikhlas touches it, he will hear this melody. If he comes only with knowledge, his ears will hear only wind." Rafik realizes right then that the ancient builder's prayer was literally fused into the physical structure of the clay itself. It was intentionally designed to remain completely locked to anyone probing it with mere intellect. The next morning, Rafik tries to sit down and write his scientific paper. But under the harsh morning sunlight, treating it once again as cold, hard data, the frequency just vanishes from his computer screen. Gone. He cannot replicate it. The text describes Rafik actually breaking down in tears, deeply overwhelmed by this crushing realization that he has spent 20 years of his life chasing the physics of sound, but he entirely missed the true source of it. So, he leaves his equipment behind, he performs wudu, the physical act of ritual ablution and purification, and he approaches the brick not as a scientist demanding data, but just as a human being showing humility. He touches the brick again, and the frequencies return. Crystal clear. So, the crucial point is understanding the actual mechanism the source is proposing here. The specific word the ancient builder used was ikhlas. Now, traditionally, this translates to absolute sincerity and devotion, but the text proposes a truly fascinating, almost sci-fi redefinition of the word. It frames ikhlas as a powerful, non-linear acoustic field, like an emotional frequency so utterly profound that it actually alters physical matter. What you should really take away from this is the source's core thesis, that human intention, when perfectly sincere, is a tangible, measurable energy that can bypass the limits of time, space, and even material decay. Now, you might be wondering, how does the modern scientific world react to a discovery like this? Well, the aftermath is pretty much exactly what you'd expect. Rafik submits his findings, but the scientific journals flatly reject his paper. Their reasoning is pretty simple: prayers and data. Which, is fair from their perspective. You really can't peer review a requirement for physical humility, can you? Following this massive rejection, Rafik actually resigns from his prestigious university position. He takes the brick back to his hometown, where it's placed right next to the mihrab, the prayer niche, in a local mosque. The source notes that when people facing hardship go and touch it today, some hear the melody, while others, just exactly as the builder warned all those centuries ago, hear only the wind. And the story doesn't even end with just one brick. Subsequent archaeological digs at that same Nineveh site ended up uncovering 10 more of these bricks. And the truly incredible thing is, each single one contained a different nano-preserved recording. Different verses like the Ayatul Kursi, or chants like the Takbir. Rafik debuts that multiple different builders, all working on that original mosque 1,200 years ago, had each poured their own unique devotions into the clay as they worked. They essentially created a hidden acoustic library of faith perfectly preserved in the mud. Faced with this hidden ancient library, Rafik completely changes his entire life path. He stops being this rigid sound scientist and instead becomes an interpreter of what he calls heart-born sound. There's a quote from him in the text that just beautifully summarizes this whole transformation. He says, "Wind-born sound dies, but heart-born sound doesn't even lose to a brick." He realizes that the truest, most permanent frequencies aren't the ones caught by millions of dollars of advanced laser equipment, but the ones generated by genuine human intention. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. The source material leaves us with this really profound dichotomy to chew on. We live in an era where our machines can capture and quantify almost every single metric of the physical world around us. Yet, this entire narrative suggests that absolute devotion can capture eternity, embedding itself into the very fabric of the earth in a way that our best technology cannot replicate or even consistently measure. It really makes you wonder, in our heavily quantified, data-driven lives, are we always listening with the right frequency?